Okay, I believe we're back. So I have my random number generator up on my calculator, and I have my sheet of random words. Now, if you haven't seen this section before, basically what's happening is there are 25 nouns, there are 25 verbs, and there are 25 adjusters, so adjectives or adverbs. And so I'm going to pick three random numbers, starting with 7, which is a rectangle. We're going pretty simple today. We'll pick another one, which is 1, which is sit. I'm not sure. I think we actually had that on the previous one. Yes, so I can see from a previous comment that it was sit. So we'll go with a new one that's 24. So that is print. And we have our third number, which is for the adjuster, that is 21. And we have thin. So we have rectangle, print, and thin. So we have to decide what order these are going in. Is the rectangle being printed in a thin way? Is there a thin rectangle that's printing something else? But I think that it'd probably be easier to go with the concept of the rectangle itself being printed. Or perhaps it's something that is going to be used to be printed to print something else later, but it's a thin rectangle. So maybe we can work with that. So we'll get some 3 dimension in here so that we know that it is a thin rectangle, but we are working. So that in itself is a pretty thin rectangle, but we should also make the 3 dimensional prism somewhat of a thin rectangle in all regards. So this is the 3 dimensional prism made up of thin rectangles. Now, I would guess a thin rectangle would be under a 2-to-1 ratio, so less than a 2-to-1. Well, actually, this would not make sense. So we need the 2. It is a 2+to1 ratio. So this would mean that it is at least 2-to-1, because we want the length of this rectangle to be much longer. So this will be L, and this would be W, and this would be, let's say, H. That's pretty normal. So we want L to be much greater than W, and we want W to be much greater than H. And then H is the final dimension, considering it is 3-dimensional. So these are our terms to live by, but we also have to get into the actions of this. So we have a thin rectangle here. It is actually a thin rectangular prism made up of thin rectangles. And so this prism is actually going to be printing something. And so we have to first decide what it could be printing. But we can just kind of go on the idea that we've already gone through. So we can actually have this rectangle print subsequential thin and thinner rectangles within it. So if you we can imagine that this is actually a block of rubber or some sort of squishy material that can be somewhat malleable or at least carvable. Because if you actually have a block of such material, you can take a sharp object to it, and you can actually gouge out individual pieces, and then if you were to run it through some ink and press it to a paper, you would be able to draw out a design. So maybe we are going to color this in a little bit darker, and this as well. And so we have this color scheme we're working with, and we'll continue this on throughout the rest of the prism. But we can actually maybe just say that this is a stamp in general. So If we grab our outliner, we could have some sort of handle, and then this handle itself would be three-dimensional, and we're going to have to work with the angles a little bit. So I'm not sure that I'm staying true to my perspective, but we'll try and work with what we've got. This would actually have to go straight down, so there we go. That looks about right, and we can get some perspective going to where it actually seems to get smaller over time as it goes down the page, or at least stretched out. And so now I have continued my failure to complete shapes as I have in the past. This is a common blunder of mine. If you look at previous drawings that I have done, so now we have our complete picture, which is now completely maroon, but I think that should do it. So we now have a stamp. If this is applied with some velocity v and some and then it has in its core some mass m, there is no changing to that mass due to the fact that it is a solid object, and we have previously gouged out these ruts. Then we can take perhaps a notepad and we can draw that out, and this notepad would have some blue lines on it if it were just regular notebook paper. But perhaps we've used some red ink, so what you will see is the ink will actually imprint what the convex shapes are. So convex being outwards, so this would be convex, and this would be concave. So the concave shapes will not show up, and the convex portions of the stamp will show up, so we will actually get a shape that looks somewhat like this. Now, usually when you do a stamp, what will happen is if you don't have the correct proportion of ink, the ink will actually leak into the concave sections of the stamped image, and so it won't be perfect, but I'm assuming that my imperfect line drawing will actually give that impression on its own. So we can color this in, and so we are getting this red image on our lined piece of paper because it is a thin rectangle made up of thin and thinner rectangles within, but we have, as humans do, made this into a tool for our disposal to print this somewhat door-like image on a piece of paper as we please. Now, if this is a hobby of yours that you enact in your leisure, then you will be very satisfied with the result. Now, I don't know that the sizing is to scale, but perhaps you can use this as a determination of how far this this stamp is from the actual paper through the distance d. If anyone wants to make an estimate of what that is, I am open to suggestions. But judging by the ratio, this is about a 1 to 1.75. I know that's improper, so 1.75 would multiply by 2 to be 3.5, and then multiply again by 2 to be 7. So if we multiply 1, that's 4 to 7. That's a 4 to 7 ratio. So if we are assuming that this point is where the stamp begins to go into the screen for us, then we can assume that perhaps this distance here is 7 units to this distance 4 units. And so I can tell you that the pixel here is 529 263. Here is 596 363, and here is 685 476. So if anyone wants to do the math based off of the size of a pixel, be my guest. I do not, so I am going to approximate this to be about 3 centimeters. So that would be, if this is 4, then this would be 21 over 4 centimeters away from this point in a straight line. So I think that we have a pretty complete picture here. And so I want to thank you guys for watching. If you have been keeping up to date on the stream, I want to thank you guys for being loyal. And I know that I have a couple friends that come on the stream now and then, and some that actually try to catch all of them. But please let anybody know if you think they'd be interested in what I'm doing here. I should be back to a pretty consistent schedule now that I have this set up the way I do. So once again, thank you guys for watching, and I will be seeing you on Wednesday.